Hi, I'm Carly Levin with the Legal Tech Fund. On today's episode of Legal Tech Briefs, we are talking about a topic that keeps coming up time and time and time again at the Legal Tech Fund. How are we training the next generation of talent? What are law schools doing today to think about the future of the law? And I am very excited. We have a guest, Dean of a law school from Florida State University, Erin O'Connor. She has been at the forefront thinking about technology, human behavior, and law students and how those all interplay and looking to the future. So we are pleased that she was able to join us on the podcast today. Thank you for coming.
Carly, thank you for having me. I think this is an important topic, and I'm honored to be part of your podcast.
Thank you. Can you just spend a few minutes how you ended up in the dean's chair at FSU?
Okay. Well, it was an interesting journey. I knew from the time I was a young child that I wanted to be an attorney. My parents divorced. My mother worked a full-time job when I was growing up, and so if we didn't have school, I went to work with my grandmother, who worked in downtown Buffalo. And I had two choices. I could help her file papers, or if I promised to be good, I could go across the street to the courthouse and watch some jury trials. And I found I loved watching those trials. Of course, it was a million years ago, and so the first several trials that I observed, there were only male attorneys. And one day, I was probably 9 or 10 years old, there was a trial featuring a female attorney. And I thought, I could do this. This is what I want to do when I grow up. So then I went to college. I double majored in economics and political science. I got to work closely with some of my faculty. They discouraged my law school pursuit. They wanted me to go earn my PhD, thought that I was naturally an academic. I was tempted about an academic career, but I was committed and had always been committed to attend law school. So I went off to law school, and while I was in law school, realized I could have both. I could be a lawyer, and I could be an academic, and so that's what I decided I wanted to do. Clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit after law school. Had planned to practice for a few years. I wanted that real world experience, but my judge didn't want her clerks to be committed to any particular law firm, because if a case came to her that involved that law firm, she'd have to recuse herself. So the law firm left the offer open. And while I was clerking, I had an opportunity to go to the University of Chicago on a fellowship. And the fellowship was designed for people like myself who wanted to pursue an academic career, to give you some time to write, but come together with a research agenda, get some teaching experience. So I went to the University of Chicago, and while I was there, I was offered an opportunity to go to Clemson University to join their economics department. They had a group of economists who were interested in legal problems, but they didn't have lawyers. And so I agreed to go for a couple of years. That group actually broke off into what was called the Legal Studies Department, and I worked on some law and economics projects there. And then was offered a permanent position at George Mason University law school. At the time, that was 100% a law and economics law school. Everyone on the faculty worked on law and economics. We all taught from the perspective of law and economics. So I spent 5 or 6 years there, and then moved to Vanderbilt University. They were very interested in my work in law and economics, but I had a much broader sense of interdisciplinary studies. So I started working on integrating first political science and then some cognitive psychology. And eventually we created a program in law and human behavior. So thinking about, if you think about law doesn't have a inherent theory of how humans behave and how law operates vis-a-vis humans, even though the whole point of law is for human society. So worked in those spaces for 16 years, and then this opportunity to be dean at Florida State University came up. I didn't have a goal for becoming a dean. That wasn't, a big piece of my academic career. But along the way, I was watching schools struggle, thinking that what was happening with reduced applications to law school and reduced jobs out there in the legal field was temporary rather than a permanent problem, and not really adjusting in any fundamental way. And so becoming dean was an opportunity for me to lead an enterprise that was going to take seriously that there were profound changes happening in the world, and that we needed to figure out how to keep the core traditions that would matter going forward, but to adjust institutionally, adjust economic model, adjust how we teach, et cetera. So I've now been dean for 10 years. This is my 10th year, and it's been a really, really rewarding experience.
I'm going to come back to those profound changes that you that you mentioned. But first, it is in just hearing about your background, isn't it amazing how that female lawyer that you saw when you were a kid has such an influence on where you've gone today? I can think of a moment like that. I met a female banker, investment banker, when I was sitting on an airplane one time, and I just thought she was the coolest coolest woman in the world, and then went on to become an invest. I went on to become one
Yeah,
several years later. It's funny how that works.
it really is. I'm the first female dean of Florida State University's College of Law, and I remember when I first stepped into the role, many of our female alums would introduce me as the first female dean. Every conversation included it, that I was the first female dean, and after a few months, I asked, like, could we stop with the first female dean thing? To which the response was no. No. It was tough for us as law students way back when. It was tough for us to be taken seriously as professionals. The fact that you are a female dean tells us that we've moved to a different place, and it inspires us that we can do things that maybe we didn't think we could do before. And so, no, we're not going to stop. And I thought that was such a lovely answer.
Are they still doing it 10 years in?
Occasionally, yes.
So your career has spanned law, economics, human behavior. How does that position your mindset for where we are in legal tech today?
Interesting. So, again, starting with law and economics, my brain always thinks like an economist, or at least a behavioral economist. So, I would say first, this is a conversation I have with skeptical faculty who often think that venture capitalists are making mistakes. They've gotten impatient with technology. This is just a technological bubble. Um, and I'm always thinking and responding, markets are smart, right? When people actually put large amounts of money on the line, they're not doing it without thinking hard, researching, um, thinking about trade-offs, making difficult decisions. And so, as between someone who's sitting in the Ivory Tower, be hoping for retirement before having to make changes with technology, to talk about how, you know, as between the two, I would choose the markets as being more intelligent. The other is, I'm much more appreciative from an economics perspective, much more appreciative of the demands for administrative efficiency at universities. Um, from an economics perspective, there's tremendous pressure on universities not to continue to raise tuition. Education is far too expensive today as it is. But there's also pressure on us always to do a better job with education and an educational product. And so if you have fixed tuition, and at Florida State University, our tuition has been fixed by the legislature for more than 10 years. If you have fixed tuition, but demands to do better and to do more on the educational front, you have no choice but to figure out how to take care of administrative tasks as efficiently as possible. And so that's when we get people grumbling that, oh no, there's another system, or oh no, we're asked to deal with technology rather than hiring a person who will just hold our hands and show things to us. Um, I'm constantly focused on that, right? We all want a better educational product. That's our first priority. It comes at a price, and we have to think about that. Um, I think from the human behavior perspective, I'm always conscious of the fact that our brains didn't evolve to manage well in a fully automated world. that as much as we're wanting to embrace technology and figure out how to use it to solve our problems, it's very important for us as humans to be human centric in the way that we operate. And so figuring out that balance, figuring out how to not lose the human in the process of automation is really important. And a lot of my work and thinking also focuses on people's attitude toward risk and how risk averse individuals can deal with things psychologically. And so it's really important for me as a leader when we're thinking about technology here at the law school and I think this is a university philosophy as well, to think about introducing technology to our constituents with carrots rather than sticks, right? Some universities are telling faculty, you must integrate this, you must figure this out, you must use X, Y, or Z product. But we instead are providing grants and opportunities to attend trainings or conferences, just having someone who's used technology in a really interesting way that's advancing their research or advancing their teaching, providing that person an opportunity to show that off with others. And because what we don't want is the community to get defensive or really concerned about the changes that are happening. Instead, we want a sense of positivity and opportunity to sink in here at the College of Law.
My next question was going to be about how you as dean decide what technologies the student should be embracing and learning about. But I want to ask that now with something else that you just said, which is it sounds like while you're teaching technology, you're also focused on that teaching relationships and your human centric point. So how are you teaching both of those topics at the same time?
Yeah. So one thing we did was with the carrots, and we find folks who are really interested and excited about what's happening. We then find leadership roles within the institution for those individuals to experiment with technology that's available. Right. So our biggest fans, we have a faculty member who made ChatGPT his best friend over winter break, the year that ChatGPT was first introduced publicly. We had him show students, show faculty, show staff in different meetings some of the fun things ChatGPT could do for them. And then we made that individual associate dean for technology at the College of Law. And he will experiment. He will bring students in, right? If you want to know what students should be working with, first you want to experiment, but then if you can, you want the students to come in and play with it too and see what it could do or not do. Again, hoping to generate some excitement amongst the very population you're going to ask to use the tools either in their research assignments or in their classwork or for career readiness, et cetera. The director of our research center, which was classically a law library. We were one of the very first, for budgetary reasons, to move to electronic resources. And along the way, that director got really excited to learn about the various technologies that were available. And so we fund her to go to conferences, to learn everything that she can, to be in the room when something new is coming up, and she'll keep an eye out for, again, what's something we might want to experiment with locally. And then the head of our IT team is similarly very excited with different kinds of technologies that might be useful across the board. And she has just a delightful personality. So we have her lead conversations at lunchtime with some regularity about new tools that might be available that could be useful at the college.
I like that evolution of the law library to the most tech forward department. That's a nice story. So right now it sounds like it is uh, more of experimenting and bringing people in out of interest rather than forcing anything on students or professors at this point.
Well, I mean, students. So our legal writing faculty are incorporating legal technologies, the latest legal technologies, into the research portion of their work. For students that are have basic writing challenges, we're figuring out ways to use technology to help provide those students more examples of effective communication and effective writing. So there's some that's being introduced, to mandatory classes that have to happen. But the new latest, what are we going to experiment with? We do try to have that be entirely voluntary.
Yeah, what a great use though for students that need extra help to get a few extra training reps
Yeah,
using technology.
exactly.
What skills do you think law students today need as you launch them out into the world? What's changed in your 10 years as dean?
Yeah. So technology's, I think, changed a lot. I think, first and foremost, students should be exposed to technology and learn how to use technology well. And that is changing very rapidly. Our 3Ls probably know relatively little about the new technologies. Our 1Ls came in knowing more than many of our faculty. So as the world experiments, we kind of race to move ahead. But 2 years ago, the change was try this. It's an interesting tool. It could be useful. Let's talk about how it could be useful. And now it's more, okay, you're using all these tools. How do we use them safely? How do we protect data? How do we use them ethically? And what's coming around the corner that we might anticipate and help with. Um, Along the way, I think we've always, law schools in general have always trained law schools to deal with change, right? We don't treat the law as something that's static and we'll teach it to you and you'll be an expert in it and then you'll go off and use that law forevermore, right? Legal education has always been, the law will change. It looks one way today, it will look a different way tomorrow, and legal issues, a creative mind willing to think about where there is uncertainty to help use live legal issues to help our clients is important. And so you need to be comfortable with uncertainty. You need to see that it's your friend. You need to find your own path, because there won't be a professor telling you what you're supposed to know when you're handling real world clients. And so, how do you find law? How do you help reshape it? How do you help move it? A lot of that is about teaching students to be comfortable with and use uncertainty to their advantage and change to their advantage, or their client's advantage anyway. So we've always been thinking about training our students to be creative and adaptive leaders. And now we have the technology wrinkle, right? And so that's something we've always done. But how do we reshape the education to think about technological change, and to think about how to be adaptive in one's career, with the changes?
Yeah,
Uh,
in some of our other conversations on this podcast, we've spoken to chief legal officers at companies and to chief people officers at law firms. And actually, the themes that you're saying are what they're looking for in law, in who they're hiring. The main things haven't changed. They're looking for curious people and they're looking for adaptable people who can learn. So all of that lines up with what you're saying. And then they're also looking for expect this generation to know more than they do,
yes,
to
yes,
come in and have ideas that they just don't have,
yeah.
to bring more to the table.
And I think that's been true for many years, right? We've been telling our students for many years, we can train you so far. You're going to get into that law firm, and they're going to have to make an investment in you. And your goal, when you're interviewing and when you're a young associate, is to show them that you have something to give back. And for many years now, that's been technology, right? The pace of the technology is increasing rapidly, and that's changing the way people do work, in I think in ways that we didn't predict would happen at least quite so quickly. So it's even more important and even more imperative that that our graduates, kind of be not just adept but ahead of the practice in terms of knowing what's there and helping the firm adapt and adjust. But we this has been happening for I would say a good decade.
What are the gaps today with how law is taught and how law is actually being practiced?
So I think the biggest gap, you hear it expressed in different ways, but I think the biggest gap that's it's always been true is that when we teach law in law school, we are asking our students to be thorough, to be careful, to make no mistakes, and to be conceptually creative, right? We don't necessarily seek real world judgment. Um, we don't build in competing factors that exist in the real world of legal practice, like how do you provide a prompt and cost effective service to the client, right? We're asking students to be students and be as perfect as they can be in identifying the law, understanding the law, and thinking about it creatively, maybe in some wild unrealistic way, but thinking about it creatively. And then we send them out into the world, and legal employers scratch their heads and say students don't have judgment and they don't understand that the client doesn't want to pay a gazillion dollars for a perfect answer, right? There are trade-offs here. I think that gap has always existed. um, but I also think that we can do better, and we have been doing better, I think, but we can do better in helping to close that gap. At Florida State University, we have upwards of 300 practical skills opportunities, and we are fortunate to be in a city with a very high per capita rate of attorneys, and all the major law firms here in the capital of Florida, because the clients have business in Florida. And that's where you can learn some of the real world trade-offs and constraints. That's where you can put your perfect skills to use in a way that can be more cost effective. And we find that's been helpful. But now we have, in the academy in general, is something that I'm working with faculty on every day, is this sense that one problem with technology is that it causes students to make shortcuts, right? We don't want students de-skilling as a consequence of technology, right? That good writing requires that you practice over and over and over again. You need 17 different drafts. Well, maybe perfect writing isn't what the world is going to need when we can automate editing or make it easier. Or well, technology can create hallucinations and make mistakes, and we can't make mistakes. We have to be 100% perfect. Well, what if we train the students to use the technology and we train them to find the mistakes and work to make sure that their work product, right? This is a cost-effective way to, to deliver a better product more cheaply. And then sometimes you'll hear faculty who have concerns say, well, a good lawyer knows their way in the storm, and what I'm worried about is that technology will show the path to the student and they will never figure out how to know their way in the storm. And it's like, we could have said that about cell phones, right? That cell phones, help us get around the world, and humans should need to figure out how to get around the world without such tools, so that if they ever lose those tools, yes, but when we're in a world where everyone has a cell phone, then maybe we don't have to worry so much about whether people could figure out how to, get from A to B without being able to communicate with anybody or anything. It's just what we're looking for the professionals to do or the humans to do changes over time, and so we shouldn't think of technology as a shortcut or a source of mistakes so much as we should think of it as a tool that will help shrink this gap between we're 100% perfect and we need to be training students how to be the best at everything to we need to be training the students how to be the best in the world that they will be entering.
I like that. When you think about the world of legal tech and innovation, what do you need from the world of legal tech and innovation, and how should these partners be working with law schools? And what should law schools be giving back to folks who are trying to innovate?
It's a great. That's a great question. I've been asking when I talk with innovators. I've been asking them to partner with us, but partner with us. I think sometimes not from the beginning, but from the middle. So FSU, for example, partners with a number of technology companies. I think we're one of 11 universities that Google has partnered with, where they're providing us access to products that they make available to everyone, but they're also providing us access to products that are kind of partially developed or two-thirds of the way developed or where we could experiment. And what's useful about that is that it enables the company to see how the product gets used again by real humans who are not experts, but also see how in the ways in which the product gets used best and worse, and then they can develop from there. So we become a source of very, very useful information in the process of development. And for us as a university, what's really helpful is technology. Everything's expensive, and we're trying to cut costs. If we can experiment with that product from at the beginning, cost free to us, we're much more, and we know it works well. We're much more likely to make that investment to purchase it, and so that partnership along the way, I think, helps on both sides very much. We've had some legal tech companies approach us to see if they could have students volunteer play with their product. If you think of a law student the equivalent of a partially skilled attorney, and you have that person experiment with your product and figure out the user pitfalls from that particular perspective, then you know that you probably have every all the skill sets within law covered, right? Because you think of lawyers, the law students, as having less skill, maybe more technological skill, but less skill in sort of navigating through a legal problem. Um, and so we find that partnership to be really helpful. Um, in terms of what universities need, I have heard our university CIO say time and time again that universities have to be very sensitive to data privacy. It's probably true of many clients, right? Customers. But we've got the FERPA problems and the HIPAA problems and the protecting the research issues. And what could be maybe useful to some companies is to get access to our tech agreements with companies because they're publicly available, but they could give a company a kind of a heads up sense of just how much the universities are seeking in the privacy space, because it's just an area where we have to be extra cautious.
A lot of opportunity. I mean, it's good for us to keep in mind as we're meeting with portfolio companies and prospective companies thinking about how to work with universities. Okay, I'm gonna put you on the spot for the last question. One thing I've been thinking about personally is I have a 5-year-old daughter who's in kindergarten today. What do you think law school will look like when she's ready to apply, when she graduates?
Oh, that's interesting. So, the we've been having a lot of conversations here at the law school and with potential employers about one caution that we're asking us, but also asking legal employers to be careful about, and that is the line between human capability and technological capability shifts every single day. So what what I thought, humans would always be superior to technology in certain realms, what I thought a year or two ago is already changed, is already something different has already
A week
happened.
ago.
Exactly. Um, but so too, like, I don't know if we can really predict. I certainly can't as much as I try really predict where that line, how fast that line is going to change and where that line is going to be 10 years from now or 20 years from now or 25 years from now. Surely humans are going to be better at some things, but I don't know that my predictions have proved wrong in the past. So maybe I've just given up. But like, I don't know that we can predict that really well. And so the lawyer's tendency, right? Good lawyers try to see the tea leaves, figure out where something is going and get in front of it and, make that prediction and start acting for tomorrow today on behalf of the client or on behalf of ourselves or whatever it may be. And so the caution is like, I don't think we can do that terribly well if we think too far into the future, and too far is becoming a shorter and shorter period. And so I'm hard pressed to say what that world will be in law school. But
I certainly can't predict. I agree with you, and I think even if we when we sit down in a year, I think we'll be having a totally different conversation.
yeah,
Um,
just if we can get everyone comfortable with the uncertainty and curious and willing to experiment and adapt, then I think we've done the best we can, for planning forward.
Thank you so much for joining today. This was so insightful, and I really appreciate learning more about what you are doing at FSU.
Thank you, Carly. I'm enjoying following your podcast, and will continue to do so.
Thank you.